So Shay and I have a strict no yelling policy in our marriage. And we have from day one. And it wasn't actually something we officially signed. It just is something that happened kind of organically. And then we've realized over time that this has been a reality for us and that it's a bit rare. And we've seen the benefits of it. And when we've counseled couples and we've talked to them, we've zeroed in on this issue of yelling in the marriage. So what we want to do today is share with you sort of the why we believe you should create, if you haven't already, a no yelling policy, and how you can do it, and then finally give you some hope, give you a picture of what a yelling-free marriage and home could look like and how it could benefit you.
Welcome to the Family Goals Podcast. We are Shay and Graham Cochran, and we believe that your family can do things differently. The payoffs are worth it, and the little things can have a huge impact.
Welcome back to another episode of the Family Goals Podcast. I'm pumped to hang out with you today. I hope you've been enjoying these episodes. If you've been liking them, tell us. And hey, would you do me a favor? Tell us what you want in an upcoming episode, okay? So we got a lot of things we want to share, but we're really trying to tailor it to you. So if you're listening or watching, just message us under the YouTube videos, leave a review on Apple Podcasts and say, please make an episode about blank. That would be so helpful for us. I know I want to jump into it, but today I just want to cast a little bit of vision. Like Shay and I, we've seen a lot of marriages over the years. Like we've counseled people informally. People come over for dinner, or we talk to couples, and we've just seen the devastation of yelling in a home, right? And I'm sure you felt it. Like, and if you've yelled at each other, like this is not a judgment on you. Like we've all yelled. We all get angry. We all get frustrated. This is really just like hey, we've seen the collateral damage. We've seen what it can do. And then we've also seen the fruit of removing yelling or taking yelling off the table in the marriage and in the family. And so what we want to do today is give you a bit of a rule that if you were to adopt this rule, A, why you'd want to, B, how to do it, but then paint a picture of what could happen in your marriage or in your family if yelling is completely removed.
Yeah, I love this topic because to me, this is actually kind of a cornerstone of our family culture. And I don't think we intended, I don't think we created that intentionally per se, that we're going to be a family or a home where there isn't yelling. But I think where people start to feel the pains of it the most, it's already painful. It creates a lot of collateral damage, even just in a marriage. But I think when people start to notice the culture that they've created is when they have teenagers. Yeah. Because all of a sudden they have teenagers that will yell and slam the door, or they'll just verbally unleash. And they're like, where did this come from? Now, granted, there are probably homes where that was not at all modeled. And they're picking it up from television. They're seeing it in media, and so the kid's kind of doing what he's going to do, regardless of regardless of the home culture. But it has come up in conversations with our girls where they're like, "I just can't even picture that. That would be so weird if we yelled, or if you yelled at me, or if I yelled at you, or if they yelled at us, or we yelled at them. That'd be so weird because it's just not a part of our culture." So, if you haven't felt the pain of it in marriage, I think people start to really feel the pain of it in parenting. And who are the kids modeling? They're just modeling what they've seen and what you've maybe allowed to be established as a norm, whether you meant for it to or not. So the beauty is there. You also then get to reap the benefits of creating a home that has a no yelling policy, and a marriage which starts with a marriage that has a no yelling policy. You begin to see the benefits in the home culture as well. All of that to say, I really love this topic. Feels like a small thing, but it actually has huge implications to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just get to the point. Yelling, I think if we stop and think about it rationally, which you don't do in the heat of the moment, hence why you yell. You're just
That's why we're talking about this now while you're not angry.
In the moment you're just like, But if we're sitting calmly, we would probably all agree that yelling doesn't actually accomplish anything.
If we're being reasonable, level-headed people right now.
We tend to yell in the moment to accomplish something, to get someone's attention, or to get them to see our point of view, or to get them to see that we're really hurt and this is important. There is a reason why we yell, But then yet, if you were to look back on the replay of your conversation, you probably would agree, man, yelling doesn't really accomplish anything. And really what it's going to do, depending on your spouse or the person you're yelling at, it's going to create one of two options. That person's personality will usually dictate it. It'll either make them shut down. Maybe your spouse shuts down when you yell at them.
If they're not a yeller.
Yeah. Or it'll do the opposite.
Yeah.
All right, they pull out the guns. And so then they fight back and they will yell at you and it riles them up. So either of those don't lead to anywhere we want to go. If your spouse shuts down, then you don't get to solve the problem because they're like done. Either they're done because I don't deal with this, or they're like fearful, or they're like hurt, walls are up. And then if they come at you with the big guns, well, now you're just like shooting each other and you're still not hearing each other's heart and you're still not even being able to communicate.
Oh, you're just creating more damage that then you're going to have to work through. So now you had your original problem and now you have this other problem of how you disrespect each other and the things that you say in your anger that aren't really true, or that create more damage or more doubt. And when you have the person that does rise to the occasion, you create a culture where now what are you going to do next time to get their attention? Because if you can't just speak plainly and be heard, then now you're creating a culture where that doesn't work. Now I have to yell. And so then I have to yell louder next time, or I have to say even more dramatic things, or you're just going to, you create
slam
a culture.
Things,
right now I've got to slam things. Now I got to throw something. Now I'm going to
really
hit.
Aggressive words.
Right.
The words have
just
to change.
Think about the culture that you're creating when that is what's happening, that the other person is fighting back. I mean, neither is good, but I'm just zeroing in on if that's kind of the culture where you've allowed that to escalate, it just keeps escalating because you're just trying to make a point and now you have to do more to make the point.
So the thought I had, the thought I had is, and maybe you felt this before on either because of you've done it or it's been done to you in the marriage. It's like, why do we treat our spouses the way we do? Because we don't treat them the way we treat other people.
Right.
And there's something interesting. So I was thinking about if you have a boss or coworkers, would you yell at your boss or your coworkers? Now, I'm not asking you, would you ever be frustrated or want to have some choice words? 100% you probably want to yell at your boss. Depends on your situation, especially coworkers. But would you actually, if your boss did something you didn't like, would you just cuss them out? Probably not. Some people might. Those people won't be around for very long, but because we either respect them or we need something from them, aka employment, even in our anger, even if we get passed up for the promotion, even if we get judged unfairly, even if we have, whatever the thing happens, we have enough of a filter to say, not going to yell at them.
Say that because I don't want the consequences.
I don't want the consequences. Yeah. And yet, in our home with the person we love, that we chose to be our forever partner, we have no filter of well, I don't want to damage the relationship or I don't want to deal with the consequences. We just let them have it. And it breaks my heart to think about that metaphor. I won't yell at someone that I maybe respect.
Don't really care
or
about.
don't care about, but I will yell at my bride. And the filter goes away. So that's just
it's madness.
Thank you.
Not that we don't do it in other ways. I mean,
I know.
That is a reality. We do treat other people at times better than we treat the people in our own home. But it's a choice. And we're saying that changing the tide there to where you are actually respecting your marriage partner appropriately can start with a small decision, like a no yelling policy, just choosing to not speak to them like that.
Yeah. So if you've made that decision ahead of time, it's going to force a couple of things to happen. So one, it's going to force you, if you decided we are not going to yell, which you might regret that decision in the heat of the moment, I want to yell. But if you've made that decision and you're honoring your own word there, it's going to force you to learn how to ask better questions and communicate what's on your heart more clearly. Because what we're not saying is that there's never a reason that you might feel like yelling, or that you're never going to be hurt, or the other person's not going to do something to you that's offensive.
That level of anger is that's
real. Because you're living with another human. If you read the Bible, you see that humans are a mess, right? The Bible uses the language sinful. if you spend time with humans, you start to realize, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Even the people, we think people are good and we have a good side in us, but the longer you spend with someone, you start to see, the shadow side, and they see yours. So think about it. The person you spend the most time with, you're going to have more opportunity to see their good side and their bad side. So you're going to see more of the sinful side, of the bad side, of the tendencies of the selfishness or whatever, or you're going to just catch them statistically on more bad days because you spend more days with them. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see that's going to come out. And at the same time, there's going to be things that they're going to then do that are going to hurt you and wound you, even if they don't mean to. It could be something they say, it could be something they didn't say, it could be something they did or didn't do. In that moment, because you're going to spend the rest of your life with them, you've got to figure out a way to communicate, hey, like, ouch, like that hurt. Mm-hmm. And I have every right to be able to share with you that hurt. And she has every right to share with me that hurt. Mm-hmm. But I don't have to say that in a hurtful way.
Yeah.
There is a way to say, hey, when you did this, I really felt this.
Yeah.
And most of us haven't seen that modeled well to learn how to communicate, I've been hurt.
Yeah.
In a non-hurtful way.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And so if you've decided we're not going to yell, you may not know how to communicate that hurt, but it will force you to find a way. Okay, if I hurt Shay, how can she communicate to me, babe, that really hurt my feelings? And I may not respond to that well at first, but it's a beginning of us learning how to communicate this pain to each other.
Well, and it creates more diligence around words, right? Mm. So it forces you, because in that moment when you're hurt, you're like, how am I going to get my point across? It forces you to be diligent with words instead of just like throwing out words like bombs. Creating a culture where you're not yelling. So now we have to find another way to communicate genuine, deep hurt and anger, because those are real, normal human emotions. We're going to have to choose words carefully. We're going to have to learn to listen to words more intently. And I think that creates a good, necessary responsibility around the words that we say. And that also then is modeled to your children, right? Yeah. So the same thing is just going to get passed down, where we have like a diligence and a discipline around how we view the use of our words versus a very callous approach to words. I'm just going to say things that aren't true to be dramatic. I'm just going to make sweeping statements. I think it's beautiful. And the the yelling, no yelling is just kind of one modality to arrive at a diligent, disciplined treatment of words, a valuing of words within your marriage and within your home.
This is a good point. So another thought that just came up to me when you said that is, not everyone yells, but you might use really hurtful, snippy words.
You speak really manipulatively, use really bombastic terminology.
Yeah, no, that's a good distinction, because I'm like, man, you may not raise your voice, but you might be like, well, you always whatever, or you never whatever, or you're such a...
Oh, some people are very quiet and sarcastic and cutting. So that's why the diligence and discipline with words is almost like a separate thing. But for some people, kind of applying this no yelling policy will be what helps them to then address this issue over here, which is do we value words? Are we diligent with words? Are we careful with words? Do we listen well? Do we choose our words wisely and not throw away words? You're right. That's something we want to get at, whether you're a yeller or not a yeller. We want to get to disciplined, discerning, diligent use of words.
And I'll use myself as an example. I'm not a yeller, but if I'm flustered and frustrated or angry or hurt, I don't do a great job of filtering through the Rolodex of potential words and when I'm trying to communicate fast enough or calmly enough that I'll just throw out a word that's a little bit more dramatic or a statement, because it's closer to the tip of my tongue, so it's easier to get out. But I haven't evaluated, is that really true?
Yeah.
Is it helpful? I'm not. So that's an area of weakness for me, is I'll say things that feel true in the moment, but I haven't really given them much thought.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you need to put a pause, and maybe you're quick on your feet and I'm not as quick on my feet, but have a pause to be hey, the words matter. And there's grace. If I say something, I can be you know what, that wasn't true. You can always come back. But they do hurt, they sting, they last. There's probably all of us have things that were said to us either in childhood or by a mentor or someone that stings to this day, 20 years later. That can happen. So maybe just pausing before you say something to make sure, is this really what I'm trying to communicate?
Yeah, it's that whole "is it true" kind of filter is just so beautiful when you're talking about how we choose words. Because maybe in the moment what you were about to say feels true, but if you are self-disciplined enough to stop and think, like, is what I'm about to say really true? I feel like you and I both work really hard to speak what's true in those types of situations. What's really true, not just felt to be true in this moment.
And this is something that I've learned from you. You do a really good job of, I think you communicate your heart really well. I think you have a lot of high wisdom and self-awareness in general. And then in hard situations, you're able to remain very calm, which benefits our marriage. And you're able to really think deeply about what is really the root of what you want to communicate, that you feel. And so I rarely feel like you've ever said something that's dramatic or like, you always do this or you never do this. Like that would be very rare for you to say that.
Likewise. Like that's just not done in our house very much.
Yeah, but I feel like you've modeled that well. I think I learned from you and how you do that.
I appreciate that.
Hey, I hope that you're loving this episode. But listen, what we really want to do is save you from one more boring night of tech gather time spent scrolling your phone side by side. We have a better idea. Okay, we've created 5 absolutely foolproof conversation prompts to help you connect with your spouse today.
Yeah, these are like literally fill in the blank easy. Simple questions, nothing heavy, nothing too serious. These are light and fun to do exactly what they say, to help you connect. So to get these free conversation prompts, just go to familygoalspodcast.com/connect. They're free, they're fun, use them today. Now, back to the episode.
So that was a bit of the why we don't think you should yell. It sounds ridiculous to say that, but this is.
But there's a lot underneath it. Like there's gold that we're getting at, and just the not yelling is kind of just one way of getting there. So
maybe like walk us through like the two sort of hows, like two sort of simple thoughts on like how can you have a no yelling marriage?
Yeah, I think one we didn't talk about this, but I think there is a mindset shift that needs to happen, because I've even caught us, I've even heard us kind of saying this, that like I'm a yeller or I'm not a yeller. I think it's interesting that people could write off this content because they're like, well, I'm just a yeller. Like it's a part of who I am.
It's my Enneagram number, the number 17, the yeller.
And hear me, like passion is good. It is right and good to get angry. There are things happening in the world and in our home and in our neighborhood and in our families and in our churches and in our schools that we need to get angry about.
Yep.
So what we're not saying is that anger is bad.
Emotions are bad.
Or emotions. And again, this is just a scriptural concept, but it's not that anger is bad. Even Jesus got angry. We should get really angry about things that are wrong about the world. But it's what we do with that anger when it's, when we're facing each other. So back to the mindset thing, I just think that it's not serving you to say, I'm just a yeller. That's who I am. Just like it's not serving you to say, well, I'm just not that smart, or I'm not good with numbers, or I'm just, I just have I lose my cool really easily. Do you really want those identity statements? Like, is that really, it's also just an abdication of responsibilities. It's an unwillingness to take ownership for being different. So the invitation here is you can be different. You can be a different type of person. Do you want to be a yeller? Do you want to be a person who's sarcastic? Do you want to be a person that has to use manipulative words to get people to listen to you, or not? Because if you don't, then take some ownership. Let's stop saying, well, I'm just a yeller. My parents were yellers, or, that's just the kind of marriage we have. It's really explosive. And then, we're passionate, and then we repair passionately. I'm like, y'all are doing so much damage. Just take some ownership. So mindset, let's just choose carefully what we're saying is true about us or about our marriage, and take ownership and decide differently. But I think very practically, another thing would be that you do have to both agree to this kind of policy. Like a lot of things that we talk about relating to marriage, finances being one of them, it can't just be that one of you is willing to say, you know what, I don't want a marriage culture where there's yelling. I don't want a home life where there's yelling. are you also willing to commit to a no yelling policy? And you bring the kids into it and you say, kids, like, we really don't want to be, no one's going to say, I just really want to live in a home with a lot of yelling. Like, no one's going to argue that.
No.
So both people have to be bought in, right? Both people have to be involved. This can't just be one person commits. Although, I don't know, now that I'm saying that out loud, I think there may be instances where you, in wanting to be the change that you want to see in your marriage, you may actually have to decide, I am going to adopt a no yelling policy. That's, another scriptural concept is like, you might have to be the one that goes
lead
first.
Out in it,
You may have to lead out because that's the whole personal responsibility. Like, I can't be responsible for his actions and his attitude within the marriage, but I am fully responsible for mine. Yeah. And if I don't want to be the type of person who yells and uses words in a manipulative way, then I'm going to have to just be responsible for my own behavior. So, I don't know, maybe I just credited our whole first point because the reality is most people, both parties may not agree.
Well, I think there's a really good point. I mean, I think there's just a principle there for all these things of like, if there's a change you want in your marriage, you need to go to your partner and well, no, you need to go to
I'll stop talking.
Sorry, maybe I'll just say my point first. Just give us a second. I was going to say is if you want change in your marriage, like you should communicate that change. You can't, like, they can't read your mind. If you're the one listening to this and your spouse hasn't yet or won't or whatever, just if you're the one that's like, I really want to get out of debt or I really want to parent our children in this way, you can't just have that in your mind and hope that your spouse says, why aren't they on board? Because you haven't talked about it yet. So you got to talk about your spouse.
Give them a chance.
Give them a chance. So maybe you say, hey, I don't want us to yell. And maybe like, screw you. And they yell you out about the no yelling policy. But you got to come to them first. If for some reason they're not on board, which happens a lot, and not because they're bad or you're bad, you're two different people on different journeys.
And you're poking at something in them that just is going to be
and even if it was a really innocuous, non-threatening thing, like if you were really interested in some kind of different
hobby.
And they weren't interested in it, or you were interested in a certain type of books or whatever, you're on a different journey and they might eventually catch up. Like marriage is going to be a lot like this. Like as they grow, and then you'll catch up, you grow. You're both growing together and we're both observing. So just give them some grace. But if you bring it to them and they're like, not interested in this stupid no yelling thing, at least you've gone to them first. But then it would be foolish and a sad state if you were like, well, they don't want to do this no yelling thing. So I guess we'll always yell at each other.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Maybe they didn't agree to it or didn't see eye to eye with your idea at the beginning, which is sad.
Or think it was possible.
Or think it's possible, which is usually why people don't agree to things, so they don't see the vision. Okay, well then plan B is you're still half the marriage. Yeah. You can start living that way. So like if in the finances or in your health journey, if your partner doesn't want to go on the health journey with you, then you can start going on the health journey way harder if you don't have buy-in from the person. I get it, but you it's amazing what your spouse will notice in you if you lead by example. And so you can go first in this point. So I think that was just a really good point. Yep. I don't think it discredits what we're saying. I think ideally you both have to agree to the no yelling policy, but you might be able to win them over by your example first, because if they yell at you and you don't respond that way, which is very much Jesus's model, by the way, which was you kind of mess with your enemies' heads when you don't fight back, when you turn the other cheek, when you actually bless those who persecute you, when you actually give water to your enemy who's thirsty. He's like, this messes with people and it diffuses situations. So in this instance, it might actually be the thing, your lack of yelling, which is still painful if you're being yelled at, could eventually win them over, because no one wants to yell at someone who doesn't fight back. Eventually, it feels wrong. Like they sense like, I'm just beating someone down. And if there's love there, which there should be at some level, they're going to want to respond differently eventually.
Yeah, it's true. So the last just very practical piece of that is that they're probably, especially if up until now, you have created a culture where yelling is acceptable or happens, whether you want it to happen or not, it's normative. And one person is like, or both parties are like, we do want to adopt this policy. There's going to probably need to be some kind of like outward for that opens up the opportunity to leave the conversation because it has escalated. So this is just like a practical as you're kind of working this out. One other thing you might want to talk about or agree to in advance is, hey, we're committing to have disagreements without yelling. We're committed to being able to show up angry or hurt, but to navigate that situation speak respectfully, navigate it without yelling. So since we've both agreed to that, if yelling starts, I have the freedom to say, looks like we can't have this conversation right now, and I'm going to remove myself from the conversation so that I can continue to stay in control of myself and my side of things. Mm-hmm. So it will be helpful if you just kind of talk that through in advance. Like, hey, if you get heated and you start to yell, we are agreeing that in that moment, I can say, you know what?
Code red.
Time or out. Whatever. We said we weren't going to talk like this, so I'm going to remove myself. That just might be a little bit helpful.
For now. It's like, it looks like you need some code word or some agreement of like, now it doesn't seem like it's a good time for us to have this conversation, which is a level of maturity to say, okay, we need to have a conversation. Yeah. There's hurt, but maybe now's not the best time.
Yep. And I've heard people that have to do this a lot. One helpful thing can be like, make a commitment to, we're going to revisit this conversation tonight after dinner or something like that. Because that question is like, well, you can't just walk away. Like, this is a real anger for me. Like, when are we going to address this? The person who's walking away has to be willing to say, you know what? I'm stopping right now. Either when you can have this conversation without being heated, we can resume, or let's have this conversation when we're not on the way to school with the kids in the back seat. Let's have this conversation, a few hours from now or something like that.
That ain't easy. Luck. Yeah, that ain't easy.
It's not easy.
This podcast is hard, y'all.
But also, I think even if you have not both agreed to move forward with a no yelling policy, and one of you has said, listen, regardless of what we're committing to or what you're committing to, I am committing because I don't want to be a type of person that has to be really loud and manipulative of my words. I'm going to not yell. So if you start yelling at me, I am going to end the conversation and we can reconvene when you're yelling. Like, you do have the freedom to, as the person who's saying, well, I'm going to take responsibility for myself, but here's the consequence. I'm not going to engage in that. And so if this comes up, I'm just letting you know in advance so that it's not coming up in the moment that I'm going to remove myself from that situation. Yeah. Here's what I'm going to say. Here's my code word, whatever. I promise we can revisit the conversation, but I just want you to know I will be removing myself from that conversation.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I really appreciate you bringing that up in this episode, that there really is that personal ownership, because it can feel overwhelming to make change in your marriage.
In any area.
Exactly. If you feel like you're the only one who's interested and willing to make the change. Like, okay, the kids in tech episode we just did, like, I feel convicted to like remove some of the tech, but my spouse doesn't. Like, that can be hard, or a financial change or a health change or a spiritual change. Like, I want to go back to church, my spouse doesn't. This is very common and hard. Yeah. Because in marriage, you've given up the right to control somebody. You can't control the other person, but it's amazing.
But you're one, so you're still super connected.
I know, but it is amazing how you can influence. You can't control, but you can influence with your own actions. Yeah. And when I see Shay like committed to what she's committed to, like, I respect her. That's why I married her. So when I see her like, oh, she is taking ownership of this area of her life, that does influence me. Yeah. So like, if maybe I wasn't on board, like, I'll eventually probably get on board because I'm seeing her do it. But if she asked me to do something and then I said no and she never did it, it's easy for me to never have to do it because no one's doing it.
And I think we could do a whole episode just on that, like, go first concept.
Yeah.
But there's so many people that don't make any positive change because they're waiting for both people to agree. And really, it's just a way of subjugating, is that the word? Your own ownership of it, because you're like, well, we're not both committed to eating healthy. We're not both committed to going to church. We're not both committed to waking up and doing our quiet times. We're not both committed. And so it just allows you to kind of delay ownership because you're waiting for the other person to, and we've had issues like that. I have been guilty of that. I'm like, well, I'm waiting for you to get on board. But really I'm just giving myself an out. When what we have seen firsthand is that when one person decides to go first, there is absolutely positive benefit for both parties.
So good. Yeah. So the hope for you is that you'll think about having the conversation of what could it look like maybe to Shay's point, up until now, it hasn't looked like a no yelling marriage or no yelling home. It's okay.
It's not too late.
The whole premise of this show is that your family can do things differently, not only than the world, but then the way you've done things in the past. And so you get to decide what tomorrow looks like. It's never a quick change, but there is hope and it's worth fighting for. And imagine 12 months from now, if you've slowly worked towards this no yelling marriage, imagine the transformation in your home. Imagine the level of love and respect and safety that even your kids feel if no one's voice raises.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many ripple effects.
It goes on and on. It's really like a legacy changing decision because I'm just thinking about it in terms of our daughters. Like our daughters are growing up in a home where there is not a man yelling at them or at me. So now when they go to look for their spouse, if a guy's yelling at them, they're going to be like, oh,
Check,
no,
please.
That's not how I deserve to be treated. This is crazy. Whereas if it's a home where there's a lot of yelling and anger, then that's normative. And so they make decisions like, okay, yeah, I guess it's okay to be treated like that. And so then they make decisions that create a home life for them and their children that involves yelling and verbal manipulation. So the implications, you get the benefits, like you get to enjoy the benefits if you can make that change, but your children get to enjoy the benefits and then their children get to enjoy the benefits. And it just goes on and on and on. It really is a legacy shifting culture change.
Love that. Well, if this has been helpful, let us know in a comment below or in a review on Apple Podcasts. And before we go, what is something that you are grateful for today?
I am grateful. I gotta dig deep. It's been a long week. I am grateful
You can do it.
for I've had some fun shooting this week.
Not guns,
Not guns,
cameras.
cameras. Sorry for Elevate Visuals. I've had some fun. I guess I should
Take-
clarify.
She's going to the gun
Had some
range,
fun
taking her
shooting.
anger out. Lack of gratitude.
I have had fun creating images
There you
this
go.
week for my company, for Elevate Visuals. So that's been good. I don't always get time to shoot because I'm doing the CEO things. So that's been good.
I love seeing it when you
Like
take
get my creative juices
Yeah.
flowing.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
What about you? What are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for just getting some really good support for pre-orders of my book,
That's cool.
Rebel,
Yeah.
which you can pre-order at therebelbook.com.
Now we need to have a little copy that we slide up
rides
just
up.
at
Yeah,
that moment.
I should. But no, I had some amazing people who want to come alongside and like buy bulk copies and
Yeah,
support the
that's been
book
awesome.
and just it's humbling to have people like, dude, how can I get behind the book? What can we do to like make this thing pop? So yeah, grateful for that.
Love that.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. We'll see you on another episode real soon.
Bye.